on PowerTalk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You're listening to The Jan Price Show, and today my guest is award-winning director-producer Cheryl Horner McDonough. Welcome to the show, Cheryl.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. And we were talking about your brand new documentary, Parkland Rising. So how did you get, just tell the audience, I mean, if they're not familiar, let's just refresh their memories about what this movie documentary is all about and how did you get involved with it?
Well, I know it seems like a long time ago already, but it was only February 14th, 2018, which, less than 2 years ago, that 34 people were shot in the high school at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. 17 people died that day in that incident. Really, I think I saw what was unfolding the way everyone else in the country and in the world did. And I felt compelled as a documentary filmmaker, and as a mother, and, maybe because I'm originally from Florida, it was just something I felt I had to find a way to get involved with and document.
And then so you've worked, Katie Couric is one of your producers on this movie. And
yes.
Yeah, and you've worked with Katie before on her Nat Geo series, America Inside and Out. How did you get her involved in this? And you have other producers too. There's quite she's not the only producer on the film. How did you attract the producers?
Oh, so at that time in February of 2018, I was actually kind of at the tail end finishing up production on America Inside Out, and I was the director for that series for Nat Geo, and I was pretty literally on my way out the door, and I kind of took a chance, and I said to Katie, this is something I'd really like to find a way to do. I don't know how. I don't have the money. I don't know how this can get done, but would you kind of sign on? Would you work on this with me? And she said, absolutely. This is a really important topic and something that she's very knowledgeable and passionate about as well. And so she said yes. And so that was one of it was the first yes that I got. And every yes mattered along the way, trying to build a team, trying to get access, trying to figure out how to do it, trying to, get the financing to get the team together and figure out how to make this happen. She was the first one.
And how did you get access? Because you have access to actual recordings and text messages and voicemail messages and everything. How did you gather all of that, and how did you get that kind of access?
It was really a very long, slow process. Looking back, it seems a little faster than it was, but it was kind of old-fashioned relationship building, trust building, getting to know people in the community. Very early on, before the march in Washington, I got a very small team, actually a husband-wife team, Bill Richmond and Lori Raimondo, and asked them if they could go and kind of just live in that area and start to get to know people and try to figure out how we were going to do this and what stories we were going to be able to get access to. And they did what good producers and humans do. They met people, they were trustworthy and patient and sensitive, and they were able to, build that goodwill and go from one member of the community to another. And, at the end of the day, when you look at the film, we have this incredible access to, so many people in the entire community, and you've seen parts of it. We were with all of the co-founders of March for Our Lives, including David Hogg and Emma Gonzalez and Jacqueline Corin and Cameron Caskey and the Deitch brothers. And, we were really privileged to be trusted with the stories of two of the families whose children were murdered that day. So it's no small thing to be given that trust.
No, it's not. It's not. But how do you feel? I mean, obviously, as a country, when this happened, I mean, we're all, it just seems to band us all together once again. And, and it's unfortunate that we need to band together around tragedy rather than happier events. But how do you feel? I mean, I about these young people, because they really took a stand and brought this story to the forefront more than others in many ways. And they just really, I mean, we marched here. I live in Carmel, California. And there was a big gathering and we all marched here, across the country. The day that they marched on Washington was this day of incredible unity. But how do you feel about these young people and where they possibly can take our country and to continue this conversation that needs to be had? And hopefully someday we don't need it anymore, but.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. I say this is the film I wish I didn't have to make.
Right.
Well, on that point, what attracted me, what motivated me at the beginning was not the tragedy itself. It was the activism. It was the way the kids immediately reacted. They were so articulate. They were so passionate, and they were so right. They were so mature, and they really immediately kind of redirected the conversation in saying, this is not okay. This is not acceptable. And you as adults have failed us. And now we have to take this on. And that was what I wanted to document.
Yes.
So I find them inspiring.
Oh, very inspiring. Very inspiring. Obviously, when you watch this film, you can't help but cry. Listening to and hearing the actual shots. I hope I'm not giving anything away.
No.
That went on that day, and listening to all of these students' 911 calls. I mean, that's what was amazing. That hearing them. It was chilling. It was just chilling, and each one of them was chilling to listen to. How are they recovering as a community? You're right. It isn't been that long. And a year and a half ago, coming up on, it's hard to believe it's coming up on 2 years, but how's the community healing?
It's hard for me to say. We filmed our time period in the community really was between right before the march in March 2018 through the midterm elections, so November 6, 2018. We were on the road with them, with the students, with the survivors, with the families for about 9 months. I can tell you that there's so much anguish, there's so much pain, there's so much that has just rippled throughout the community that is very hard to see. PTSD is just everywhere. But how are they doing now? It's in terms of the community, that would be hard for me to say. I do know that I am still close with some of our subjects, and this is never going to go away. They cannot simply move on and forget that their family members were murdered.
Yes, senselessly too. David Hogg. Let's talk a little bit about David Hogg, because he, was, obviously, and Emma Gonzalez were two of the more vocal students. I mean, they all were, but they were the ones that stood out the most. And he does. you show when he's out there trying to talk. I mean, it just blew my mind when they were out there talking about this with obviously people who opposed them and had their guns in the interviews. Visible. These rifles and handguns, on their bodies, on their persons, when they're having this conversation with these young students. And literally, David was in fear of his life in that scene. Does he continue to have fear around? Because is he still speaking out as strongly? And have you followed him after this? How these things, there's a lot of things that go on and we hear all about it and it's all in the forefront of the news, and then we move on to the next news cycle and we don't hear as much about it. Is he still as actively involved? And if he is does he still have fears around somebody possibly trying to kill him?
Well, I actually think that's one of the parts of this story that hasn't been told. I don't think that's been seen. David Hogg received multiple death threats. His mother, you'll see in the film, catalogs the hateful things that she's told online. They certainly had to take measures to make sure that they were safe. So there were real threats. I don't know, how that continues today, but I do think that people don't know just how much hostility these teenagers faced from adults with guns.
It just blows me away.
Yeah.
It just, I literally I got chills when I watched it. I was like, well, go on. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things people need to see. I think those kinds of threats, whether they're over social media or whether it's simply someone yelling at you while they're, strapped, it's very intimidating. And these are the kinds of things that make other people very wary of ever really sharing their views. People want to keep their heads down because it's a little scary if you speak up. So I think David and so many of these other, again, teenagers were incredibly brave to continue to stay on point, stay on message despite the threats.
I agree with you. I think there does seem to be more fear about speaking out about a variety of different controversial topics, and especially today with social media and more people, people have told me not to express some of my views, on social media. And it's kind of interesting that, people are advising each other, okay, be careful. Don't say too many things about how you feel about things on social media, because you never know what can happen. And that's kind of also, we obviously didn't have all of this before. And so, it was different, but I think there is a little slight fear underneath about what someone might think of your opinion. And even though we have obviously right of free speech, it certainly has been debated a lot over the years. It's interesting. So that's why I feel even stronger about these young people coming forward and being brave to express their feelings. Of course, the baby boomer generation back in the 60s, in the late 60s, did the same thing to stop what we felt was an illegal war and spoke out. So maybe it's just something when we're younger, we're braver than we are when we get older. I don't know.
Yes. Well, I think that's true. And, actually, you'll hear David say this in the film. He very early on says, people are afraid to push back against the gun lobby, and, they're afraid to lose their job. They're afraid to get in trouble in some way. And, he's saying early on, he's in high school. His friends have been killed. He doesn't have a job to lose. He's going to speak his mind. I think those things get harder over time. You have kids, you have a job, you have community, maybe you want to put your head down. But I think it's a part of why these kids were so powerful.
I agree. And the fact that they were able to motivate so many people all across the country, to march. I mean, that's a hard thing to do nowadays too. To get people motivated to do that of all ages, shapes, and sizes.
Right. And just as we've seen with, Greta recently,
yes.
This was really, who, by the way, was inspired by the Parkland youth. She has said that. This was, again, it's in the film, but, Cameron Caskey, a 17-year-old, basically says to his friend Jacqueline Corin, hey, let's have a march. And she says, okay, let's do that.
It's like, hey, let's put on a play. Like Judy Garland would say to Mickey Rooney.
Exactly. And then you invite two friends and you invite two friends, and then we get 800,000 people to show up in Washington.
Yeah. Well, let's talk. You mentioned Greta. So just for those who do not know who she is, do you want to let the public know who she, if they haven't heard of her by now?
Sure. Miss Greta Thunberg, whose name I'm probably abusing. That's my understanding.
It's close. Yes, I'm sure it is. Good. I wouldn't attempt it, so I was glad you did.
I can only say, and I did just participate in the March for Science here, the climate change rally here in New York, which was incredibly well attended. But I do know that she was absolutely directly inspired by what she saw out of Parkland, Florida.
Right. And she's another brave person because she's 16 years old, from Sweden, I believe, and standing up and speaking at the UN, this past week. Very brave young woman, and yet she's also had threats.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Have you read that?
Yeah. I think it's what people do when they're lacking a better argument. They just go after the way you look or the way you sound, or, call you names and threaten you because I don't have anything better.
I think you're right. And there's lessons to be learned here. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies. And my guest today is award-winning director-producer Cheryl Horner McDonough, and we're talking about a brand new documentary entitled Parkland Rising, and about our youth today. will.i.am is also one of the producers on this. How did you get him involved?
Oh, there's a good story. I am nothing if not a little shameless when it comes to asking for help with this project. And I heard a song called Big Love by the Black Eyed Peas, and the video depicted a school shooting incident. And so I heard the song. I thought, wow, this would really be incredible to use this song in the film. And I found a way to reach out to someone on his team, and she immediately said, not only would we be happy for you to include that song, but we'd really like to get involved and come on board and help make this documentary happen. So will.i.am's entire team has just been incredible. They've helped in so many ways, from music to graphics, and everything in between. So they are among the many incredible advocates that I've had for this film.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
But yeah, so he's an executive producer.
Katie Couric and will.i.am. I mean, you're you're in really good company.
No, I'm definitely sitting at the cool kids table right
yes,
now.
you are sitting at the cool kids table. What do you hope? I know this movie is going to be premiering at the Woodstock Film Festival. What are the plans beyond that? I mean, is this something that you want to show in high schools? Certainly, maybe get on PBS. You've worked with Nat Geo. What do you think? Because this film needs to be seen, obviously, because we can't let the conversation go. I mean, it's like, as I said, the next news cycle, or the next shooting. Then we get all up in a roar again, about it, and then then it dies down, and then we have the conversation, and then it dies down. So I don't know what needs to happen to keep the conversation really going and making some changes. Because again, no one's asking anyone to give up their guns. I have lots lots of friends who are hunters who, you know, I would never want them to take away their gun, but we, you know, there's certain guns we do not need to have out there, and certainly doing unified background checks, you know, I don't know what's so wrong with that either, you know, although some people who are getting guns are getting them legally and through the system the proper way too. So, you know, they hadn't shown any signs of violence or, you know, mental illness or those kinds of things. We just had a shooting here not that long ago in Gilroy, California at a festival. I mean, that's only, you know, 45 minutes away from where I live. And, you know, that hit really close to home. And then there was something recently at, you know, at a festival in Salinas, although it wasn't a shooting, but, you know, so but it was a car, you know, now that people are using different things. If they can't use their guns to show their anger, they're, you know, plowing into people. You kind of go, what's the mindset in someone's head to want to destroy other people's lives when you're not happy with yours, you know? So again, it goes back to mental health and illness, and how do we, you know, help that conversation to continue to go too?
Yeah, I agree. I think that what the danger is, people become paralyzed and they think that change can't happen. And if you think there's no hope, then change cannot happen, right? So these kids and these families who became active, I think they showed a path. They created a sense of hope, and they showed that change is possible. And actually, they are making change. Look at what's happening right now. Look at what's going on with all the Democratic candidates. They've been forced to talk about their stance on gun reform. That has never really happened like this before. And I think it's a direct result of what happened in Parkland.
Yes, and there's also to add on to that, since we're just talking about Greta, climate change. That's becoming another thing that we just really need to keep that conversation going too. Otherwise, you know, we may not have a planet to be even worried about. We're going to just implode on its own, you know. Absolutely. You know, as they say, you know, if the ocean goes, so do we. Or the coral. I mean, coral's a whole big another issue out there. So there's lots of wonderful big topics that we need to talk about, especially in this next election cycle. But obviously, gun control and climate change, I think, are two of the top of the of mind for many, many, many people. So to go back to your film, where do you see it being shown in the future?
So I just really hope that it'll be shown all over the country. You know, I'd like to. So we have screenings at Woodstock at the film festival. We have another screening coming up in Connecticut in November. I hope that it will go to festivals. I hope that it will go to community centers, to college campuses, and to high schools. I certainly want to make it available for all of those purposes. You know, it has to be seen in order to have an impact. It
certainly does. It certainly does. Has David and Emma and the rest of the students from Marjory Stoneman, have they seen the film yet?
Jacqueline Corin has seen it. Fred Guttenberg has seen it. Manuel Oliver has seen it. And they are all very nicely content with the work. No one can be happy about this film. Everyone is really they seem very content with the way that it's come out and appreciative. So that's a comforting thing.
It is. What do you hope people get from this film as a takeaway?
I hope that they are enraged. I hope that there is a sense of heartbreak, and I hope that they will actually ultimately be inspired to get more involved themselves. I hope that they will understand what regular people can do to affect change. And I hope they will understand that we can all play a role, and we have to play a role, and that they will get more involved.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you, Cheryl. It was a pleasure having you on the show. My guest today has been Cheryl Horner McDonough, award-winning director-producer, and we've been talking about her new documentary, Parkland Rising. I wish you much success with the film.
Thank you.
If you have missed any of the Jan Price shows all about movies, you can go to my website, thejanpriceshow.com, and all of the shows are archived on that station. On that website. Also, you can go to YouTube and the iHeart podcast channel.
on PowerTalk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeart Radio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.